Hey guys, welcome back to the Dervinators channel. In this video we'll be doing a follow-up of sorts to my previous video, the 10 best-selling Ratchet & Clank games. Now I'm obviously following this up with the 10 worst-selling Ratchet & Clank games. Given that this is a follow-on from another video, I do recommend going back and re-watching that one first, unless you've already seen it recently, and if you just can't be bothered, then let me run through a couple of the guidelines and rules for this list. I went into this in more detail on my previous video, so I'll just give the abridged version here. For these videos, I went through all the Ratchet & Clank games, including various physical ports and stuff, and made myself a list of 20 games that I felt could be turned into a best list and a worst list in terms of sales statistics. I then went through and I did various research online and reading through old magazines like Game Informer and K-Zone, things like that. I was having trouble finding information on the last couple of games, which is when I discovered VGcharts.com, and again, as I said in my best-selling games video, I cross-referenced the information I had already researched with their charts, put them together, but if they were close enough then I would go with the VG charts estimation because it helps the video flow better. I'm not including digital sales because it's harder to get a hold of those statistics, as well as the fact that some games didn't get digital releases at the time, their physical releases, when other ones did, so it wouldn't be fair to compare the two. There is one exception to this rule on this list, and I have a good reason for that, but we'll get to that when we get to it. I'm pretty sure that's everything I elaborated on in the first video. Like I said, it's better to watch the best-selling games list first because this is more of a follow-up to that one. But if you're a maverick who don't play by the rules and you go about your own thing and you want to watch this video first, then go right ahead. Just think before you leave a comment complaining about, oh, something wasn't as well explained on this list, because trust me, I go into great details, great lengths to make sure that everything here is accurate and as well researched as I can make it. Now, of course, you can never get 100% accurate sales figures, but nobody seemed to have a problem with my previous video being in the rough ballpark, especially given the fact that none of the games were like neck and neck in the list, making any other variation would put one game above the other. Just like the other video, I'll leave all my sources and links and stuff in the description below and answer any of your questions in the comments. I'm just saying this in case this video blows up and gets more views than usual, like my previous one did. And I get a lot of people out saying, oh, why did you only use this and not this, or why did you include digital sales for this, or just any variations, because I know what the people on the internet are like. They'll say anything to get a rise out of you. And I don't want to have to deal with any of that. I just want this to be a fun experience for the viewer as well as myself, because I really enjoy making these kind of videos. Without further ado, I'm going to get stuck straight into the actual list. Again, all officially released collections are eligible. Any game that... Stay. Now, all officially released collections are eligible. Any game where the characters are like the main focus will be eligible, so things like Heroes on the Move and Battle Royale will not be a part of it, as well as obscure collections, that sort of thing. Again, if you watched the previous video, you know all this stuff. Now, I gotta give one last disclaimer, sorry guys. In my previous video, I mentioned that I had another 10 games I could make into a 10 worst selling list. Well, 2 of them were the mobile games, and I really don't feel they justify inclusion on this list, and I thought about making it like a 9 best and 9 worst, but the number 10, that's just more appealing and makes for a better video. So I'm very sorry, this will be more of like a 8 worst selling games list. But if their exclusion from this list upsets you that badly, then the official 9th and 10th place goes to Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile for the cell phone back in 2005, and Ratchet & Clank Before the Nexus for Android and iOS around 2013. Okay, so you've got Ratchet & Clank Before the Nexus, which is a prequel to Into the Nexus, even though it came out after that game was released. It's basically your endless runner with a Ratchet & Clank coat of paint, pretty harmless, nothing to write home about. The only nifty feature was the fact you could import Ruritanium from the phone game to your PS3 game, but the problem is, by the time the phone game came out, you'd probably already 100% completed and platinumed Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus, so the Ruritanium was useless and the game was discontinued shortly after. Now, as for Going Mobile, barely any Ratchet & Clank fans know about this, and those who do have only seen gameplay footage and just know the bare minimum about it. Well, take it from me, folks, because I had a friend, my old friend back in the day, TK, comes up to me and my friend William and says, hey, you guys like Ratchet & Clank? Well, look, I've got it on my phone. And he pulls up his old, I can't remember if it was a flip phone or a Nokia brick, and he shows us this really janky 2D, it basically looks like Mega Man, but with Ratchet & Clank awfully inserted in, and it was laggy, the hover pack was terrible, the weapon sounds were terrible, and it was just straight up a terrible looking game. Now obviously by today's standards it's incredibly outdated, but even back then you needed the top range phone on the market in order to run the damn thing, otherwise it would chug along at like 1 frame a second. It was just, oh, it was awful. Alright, 9th and 10th positions and the long disclaimer over and done with. Let's kick things off with the 8th worst selling Ratchet & Clank game, Ratchet & Clank Nexus on the PlayStation 3. Also known as Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus in the United States, I know, a big change there. This game released in late 2013 towards the end of the PlayStation 3's life cycle, a couple of weeks before the PlayStation 4 launched. With roughly 700,000 units sold, This game promised to be the conclusion to the Ratchet & Clank Future Saga, which of course people who know me most know what I think about that whole thing, but it also promised to be your more mainline Ratchet & Clank title, after All For One and QForce were different titles. I'm sure the price didn't help either. Despite being about the length of Quest for Booty, it was double the price of that game in my country. Speaking of Quest for Booty, the 7th worst selling Ratchet & Clank game is Ratchet & Clank Quest for Booty. As you'll notice, I'm not holding anything because I own the digital version. Now, speaking of the digital version, unbeknownst to me at the time, Ratchet & Clank Future Quest for Booty, released in 2008 for the PlayStation 3, didn't actually get a physical release in America. It only got a physical release in European countries, which is why I've elected to include the digital sales for this game, because they are readily available on things like VG charts, and I felt it wouldn't be fair for me to disclude digital sales on a game that was only released digitally in one of its biggest selling regions, which of course is the United States. So I combined both physical and digital sales together to get roughly 620,000 sales total. Sandwiched in between the cliffhanger to Tools of Destruction, as well as the stellar Crack in Time, this game offered a tighter experience at a lower price, with about 5 to 10 hours worth of gameplay, a fun little story, and it was honestly just a distraction to keep people waiting for a Crack in Time's release. After this video, I never want to say Quest for Booty again. Anyway, moving on to the number 6 worst selling Ratchet & Clank game, with only just over 500,000 sales, Secret Agent Clank on the PSP. Yes, releasing in 2008 for the PSP, Secret Agent Clank was the second spin-off title handled by High Impact Games, and I know you might be expecting it to be a poor game, having sold so low at a mere 550,000 copies, but the reality is, it was still a very fun experience, with pockets of Quark and Ratchet gameplay, as well as a really fun sort of spy take on the genre where it's all about Clank. And honestly, given Clank's gameplay in previous games, it was nice for him to have his fully fleshed out game where he could do more than just jump, glide, and command microbots or gadgetbots or whatever they were called. However, a theory of mine as to why this game didn't perform as well as Size Matters did is because this came out in 2008, the same year as Quest for Booty, and the year after Tools of Destruction. Now, I'm sure most people had their fix with Size Matters and decided, right, we've got our PS3s, we've got our new mainline Ratchet & Clank games, don't really feel like going back to the old portable console to jump on another spin-off title again. I guess people were just over the spin-offs. Haha, segue into number 5, Ratchet & Clank Size Matters on the PlayStation 2. Notice a bit of weird editing there. Well, I goofed up. Despite holding the game in my hand, I said the wrong title out loud. Anyway, with about 290,000 sales, this game didn't sell as well as the PSP version, obviously. I assume because most people were enjoying all the PlayStation 3 had to offer. This one was ported over from the PSP, and it came out pretty well. It was a pretty decent port, wasn't anything, you know, to write home about, but wasn't terrible. So people that didn't have a PlayStation Portable got to experience what this game had to offer on their classic PlayStation 2 console. People were just getting sick and tired of the spin-off titles, which explains why our number 4 spot, with just over 250,000 sales, is Ratchet & Clank QForce, or Full Frontal Assault in America. Again, I don't have this one, because I don't have the physical copy, I have it digitally, so let's just insert a creepy photo of me. Yes, another Ratchet & Clank game with a pesky name change. Full Frontal Assault, or QForce, came out in 2012 for the PlayStation 3 with roughly 250,000 sales. Now this one is divisive amongst the fans. It's basically tower defense, but a Ratchet & Clank game. Now, some people can enjoy it for what it is, a cheap, fun experience running around the map as Ratchet doing these sort of things, but it can get pretty old pretty quickly. Some of the game is pretty unbalanced and not particularly fair. It did have multiplayer, but with multiplayer brought the first microtransactions in the series, and thankfully the last to date. Anyway, it's not everyone's cup of tea, especially given that this followed up another spin-off, Ratchet & Clank All For One. This list is pretty interesting so far. So you've got PSP spin-offs, you've got PS2 ports of PSP spin-offs, you've got PS3 spin-offs. What could be worse than the three of those combined? Maybe our number 3 slot. Secret Agent Clank for the PlayStation 2. Yeah. Oh boy, this is the one I hear a lot about today. Yeah, Secret Agent Clank came out on the PS2 in 2009. That's right, the same year as the stellar A Crack in Time. Now, you saw how poorly the PSP game performed, so this one did even worse, with only 140,000 average units sold. Now, I don't know what possessed them to decide to port over an old PSP game to the PS2 the same year as one of the best games in the franchise came out, but unlike a Size Matters port, this one they decided to get Zanzaro Games to port it over to the PS2. Yes, these are the same guys that did make the stellar Sly Cooper HD Trilogy and Sly 4 Thieves in Time, but this is not one of their proudest moments. This is more your kind of Sonic Boom Zanzaro games. This port is apparently not all that great, and, well, I suppose I better tell you guys something. Alright, I'm gonna let you guys on a little secret here, okay? Just come in closer. Shh, don't tell anyone, this may compromise my integrity of a die-hard Ratchet & Clank fan. I've played every version of every port of every one of the games in the series, I know, right? But the only one I have not played is Secret Agent Clank on the PS2. Maybe I should try it, see what all the hate's about. Or not. And now you all know my dark secret. Please forgive me. Here, take this creepy Ratchet doll as a token of... Well, actually, I don't know. Just take it. I don't want him. It's too scary. What are you looking at? Now the sun comes out. I'm sorry, I'm getting way too distracted in this video. Now I know what you guys must be thinking. We've looked at some of the worst games in the series, and you now know what the worst selling games in the series are. What could be lower than that? What are the two games that sell even lower than that? Well, we're about to find out. And this next one hurts, because with less than 1 million, less than 500,000, less than 250,000, less than 100,000 sales, the number 2 worst selling game in the Ratchet & Clank series is the Ratchet & Clank collection on the Vita. Aww. This sucks. The Ratchet & Clank Trilogy for the PlayStation Vita sold roughly 20,000 units. That is terrible by today's standards, and definitely didn't deserve it, because it was really good and perfect for the Vita. This is a childhood dream of mine, to have those classic PS2 games on the go in my hand. It still feels so surreal today. Now I reckon that the disastrous Jak and Daxter PS Vita version may have severely affected this game's sales, because with the Jak and Daxter games you had the rear touchpad that did way too much, like Jak, Dark Jak, hoverboard, weapon selection, that sort of thing, but this game didn't really have that problem. The rear touchpad was only used for strafing. It's so good, this game. Oh, this sucks. It doesn't deserve to be the second worst selling Ratchet & Clank game, and I will tell you now, the original Ratchet & Clank is perfect for the Vita, with no rear touchscreen. All the buttons are utilized exactly where they need to be, so the original game with no strafing or anything like that is perfect for the Vita. It is one of the best titles you can get on the PlayStation Vita. I mean, look, they even got the right images for the correct games on the back cover. I mean, not even the PS3 version got that right. I mean, sure, it still has the Tools of Destruction image on the front, but still. I don't care what anyone says, these two were made for each other. Right, moving on to the number 1 spot. Oh, here we go. Alright guys, the number 1 worst selling Ratchet & Clank game in the entire franchise is Ratchet & Clank QForce on the PS Vita. It's so crappy, so terrible, that they gave it away for free. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Yes, damn, I hate that port. It's been nearly 5 years and I'm still not over it. Stupid bleeding piece of glitchy crap. I'll click that video there if you want to see a good take on those portable games. Oh, where's that creepy Ratchet plush?